Take my hand. I'll lead you into death. By a Whisper in the Shadows, on AO3. Episode 23. Chapter 13. To say the tension in the common room was thick was an understatement. A chainsaw would barely be able to cut through it. Not to mind a knife. Aizawa stood in front of the TV, introducing Izuku to the class and reminding them of the rules. Katsuki stood a little to his side, with Izuku behind him slightly, gripping the back of his shirt as he watched Katsuki's classmates intently. One would think Izuku wasn't paying attention, with a blank look on his face, but Katsuki knew. Katsuki could feel the slight tremors in his hands. He knew he was listening intently, carefully watching for any potential threats. Part of Katsuki felt that maybe introducing Izuku to this many people wasn't the best idea. But they were already there. They might as well get it over with. Kirishima stood on Izuku's other side, also slightly in front of him. He wasn't glancing like Katsuki, but he was clearly there as support, which Katsuki would begrudgingly thank him for later. Stupid shitty here, making him feel all soft. He continued glaring at his classmates as Aizawa spoke, not fully paying attention to him. He wasn't the only one not paying attention, however. Though their attention was not on Katsuki either. Their watchful gazes kept drifting to Izuku, eyes flickering away if they felt the stare for too long, or after catching Katsuki's own eye. Some openly glared, Katsuki's lips curling each time. Some looked between the three boys, as if trying to understand what was going on in their minds. Others were looking with curiosity, but also fear, and Katsuki hated it. He hated that his classmates could be afraid of Izuku. Izuku wasn't scary. Reaper might have been, but not Izuku. Couldn't they see he was more afraid of them than they were of him? Actually, probably not, considering Izuku's ability to keep his face neutral. Another thing Katsuki hated. He remembered how expressive the boy used to be. He hated this blankness. No matter how each of them looked at Izuku, there was one thing each on their gazes held. Confusion. Aizawa was right with what he had said in Izuku's room. The boy was full of surprises, and Katsuki felt a strange sense of satisfaction that he was fucking with the minds of his classmates in that moment. He also knew that even he hadn't fully rediscovered Izuku yet. That he wasn't even close, which promptly wiped away any pressure. Blinking rapidly, he forced himself to focus back on the conversation. Given Izuku a folder with your names and the names of your quirks. Aizawa had given him the folder in Izuku's room, which he had focused intently on for the short minutes they had while they waited for the class to gather. He still had it gripped in his hand that wasn't holding Katsuki's. One thing about Izuku that had apparently stayed the same was his interest in quirks. His love for Katsuki's clearly remaining strong. Katsuki was kind of excited to see how he reacted to others. Even if he was nervous, the younger boy would like someone else's more. His class was fucking impressive, even if Katsuki would never say it out loud. Any details you want to give him are up to you. Don't feel obligated to introduce yourselves tonight. Now, he sighed heavily, rubbing at his temple. That concludes the little meeting. I'm gonna make some coffee. When he turned to leave, he hesitated slightly, eyes on Izuku. Katsuki glared at the mistrust in his teacher's action, catching Aizawa's gaze. The man simply gave him a tired look before trotting away. The rest of his classmates also got up, and Katsuki turned to both reassure and warn Izuku about the onslaught of emotional damage that his friends, who he could already prepare to pounce. He stopped when he saw Izuku's energy had shifted, eyes alert, body jumping with nerves. He followed the boy's line of sight to find Aizawa's back, disappearing around the corner into the kitchen. Escort. Katsuki turned his back to Izuku, whose grip on his shirt was opening and closing as he looked like he was about to charge after their teacher. He hummed and questioned at the boy's antics, grabbing his hands so they moved over the scars instead. Izuku's eyes jumped to their hands, then to Katsuki's, then back to his teacher's. Rules. Katsuki, finally understanding, huffed a gentle laugh at the boy, squeezing his hand slightly to pull his attention back to Katsuki. I'm allowed to be an escort as well, dumbass. Besides, he hasn't left the building. He's not even 10 feet away. Not really, okay? You're not breaking any rules. Izuku stared at him for a moment, with a look that said he almost wanted to protest. Katsuki nearly wished he had protested, arguing a little like they did when they were younger. But no, Izuku merely nodded once, face again settling on passive. Katsuki refrained from sighing. Right. Now prepare yourself. My idiot friends are... They can be a fucking lot, okay? So, if any point you want to go, you feel overwhelmed or upset or angry or anything, just tap on my hand 3 times, okay? Katsuki demonstrated with his own fingers, tapping the hand Izuku held. With Izuku copying him, he gave the boy a small smile. Just like that, alright? Katsuki glanced between him to see his, squad, floaty and icy hot with them, sitting around the couches in different states of anticipation and nervousness. Hiroshima had moved the table and pushed one of the smaller couches over so they could be sat in a circle. Another thing Katsuki was going to have to thank the boy for, as well as keeping the rest of his friends at bay instead of bombarding Izuku like he knew they wanted to. Pinky, in particular. It wasn't out of cruelty. It wasn't like they wanted to attack Izuku. Katsuki knew that. They were just intent sometimes. Mina especially. Katsuki was glad Hiroshima seemed to understand that a lot. He pulled Izuku over to the group, pausing by the couches to decide where to put him. That decision was quickly made for him as the boy placed himself next to Hiroshima, pulling Katsuki down gently with him. Hiroshima seemed surprised by this as well, looking wide-eyed above Izuku's head at Katsuki, who shrugged. Apparently, Izuku liked shitty hair. Katsuki wasn't about to fucking start complaining about it. He needed people on his side. This seat was not fit for 3 grown teens, even if Izuku was smaller than the other 2. It did not help that Hiroshima was one of the biggest guys in their class, in height and muscle. Katsuki had to maneuver himself slightly behind Izuku to be comfortable, the other boy's hands still moving along his scars. Catching Pinky's eyes after finally getting comfortable, he glared at the gleam in them, the fucking evil smile that played on her face. He didn't like it. She shrugged lightly, whispering something to Floaty. The other girl was definitely more on the nervous side, watching Izuku warily. Hearing whatever Mina had to say, her eyes darted to her hands, a small smile playing on her lips. Katsuki rolled his eyes. Fucking gossip-hungry bitches. There was a moment of tense silence as Katsuki eyed his friends, trying to gauge their mood. Sero and Kaminari looked nervous as hell, both shifting in their seats. Kaminari kept glancing at Shinsou, who was definitely one there as moral support. For who? Katsuki wasn't sure. His face remained impassive as he watched them all, looking only mildly uncomfortable, which was unusual for him. Mina was buzzing with energy, eyes roaming over every inch of Izuku. Curiosity would absolutely be this girl's downfall. Uraraka was more nervous, just not as much as Sero and Kaminari. But she was never one to stay from a fight, and her curiosity often got better of her as well. Katsuki wasn't quite sure how Todoroki was feeling, or why he was even there to begin with, if he was honest. The boy looked bored, but he hadn't taken his eyes off of Izuku once, so Katsuki knew he was more interested than he was letting on. The blonde sighed heavily. Might as well get this fucking over with. Right. As Hobo-sensei mentioned, this is Midoriya Izuku. Fucking introduce yourselves however you like. Just one at a time. Go. He knew he sounded demanding. He didn't care. Pinky jumped at her chance. Okay, hi, Midoriya. I'm Ashiro Mina, but you can just call me Mina. It's nice to meet you. I have so many questions, but don't worry, I won't bombard you with all of them. Katsuki rolled his eyes at her eagerness, his hand behind Izuku crushing his shoulder slightly in reassurance as he felt him tense, forcing a smile down the boy's, relaxing at his touch. Hiroshima cleared his throat, Pinky's attention darting over to him. She must have seen something in his face, eyes moving back to Izuku, a small, "Oh," escaping her. Sorry, Midoriya. She continued, voice quieter. Sometimes I get a little too excited. Anyways, so, Mina's my name, and my quirk. Acid. Everyone, including Katsuki, was taken aback by Izuku's answer. Even Izuku's eyes widened slightly as he curled in on himself, squeezing Katsuki's hand and the folder tighter. There was no tapping, however, so Katsuki let Izuku take this, giving him a little nod when the boy glanced at him, unsure. Eraserhead gave me a folder. He continued, voice small, opening the folder to show each of their classmates' photos, their name, and quirk next to them. I remember. He took a large breath before listing each of their names, quirks, eyes darting to them in turn. Shinsou Hitoshi. He said last, then hesitated. He cleared his throat before choking out the boy's quirk. Brainwashing. Katsuki watched the purple-haired boy's jaw tick, eyes boring into Izuku, who had dropped his gaze. Before anything could be said, Kaminari whistled loudly. Damn, dude. You didn't even glance down once. You remember the whole class? He asked. His nerves were still obvious, though Katsuki could see his interest is growing on Izuku. When Izuku nodded, he sucked his teeth, a small smile gracing his lips. Before he could say anything else, Shinsou spoke. You don't like it, do you? He asked. Katsuki tensed with Izuku. My quirk. It scares you? The last part wasn't phrased as a question, but a fact. Izuku nodded slightly, not meeting anyone's eyes. Shinsou stared at him for another minute before he pushed himself out of his seat and silently walked towards the elevators. Kaminari followed him quickly, not before giving Izuku a small smile and telling him he'll talk later. Sero excused himself, stuttering out some excuse. Katsuki noted Aizawa hovering by the kitchen's entrance, frowning as he watched Shinsou leave. This was going to suck. They all knew how Shinsou struggled with his quirk, and this wasn't going to help him like Izuku anymore. I'm sorry. Katsuki whipped his attention back to Izuku, as the meek words flowed from his lips. He was staring at their hands intently, having abandoned his hold on the folder, both hands now pulling at Katsuki's fingers, tracing over his scars. I didn't mean to upset him. He whispered, and Katsuki was startled by the waver in Izuku's voice, though his eyes remained dry. Aizawa spoke before Katsuki could, which was good because Katsuki was bound to fuck it up more. It's not your fault, Izuku. He sighed, moving over to him. A couple of his friends blinked at the use of his given name. Katsuki rolled his eyes. They were living together and made sense. Plus, it wasn't like Izuku was a fucking Midoriya anymore. Hitoshi can be sensitive about his quirks sometimes. Don't worry too much about it. Izuku looked up at Aizawa, like he didn't believe him. An awkward silence stretched across the group, before Pinky squealed a little, startling them. I know the perfect thing we could do. Let's give Midoriya a tour. Well, it wasn't like they weren't doing anything else. The tour didn't go as badly as it could have. They didn't meet anyone directly, thank Kami, only going a few laundering looks from a couple different people, staff and students. Katsuki was just grateful they didn't run into Inko, or that copy and paste fucker from 2B. Izuku was surprisingly not as nervous as Katsuki expected, a buzzing excitement surrounding him as they went. They were going to show Izuku their quirks, but Hobo-sensei informed them that they'd be doing a sort of quirk assessment in class the next day anyways, so there was no point. They did run into the principal, which had the strangest and most endearing moment ever. Izuku had freaked out, basically climbing on, not Katsuki but Kirishima to get away from him. They had explained to him that he wasn't just a cat, and that he was who ran the school, and much, much more. After a bit of coaxing, Izuku had introduced himself and seemed to warm to the rat by the time they made it back to the dorms. Nessa didn't seem to mind the encounter at all, seeming weirdly fond of Izuku. Katsuki was a bit muffled about the whole climbing on Kirishima for safety thing. Like, why fucking shitty hair? Was Katsuki not good enough for his protection? The only answer he got, when questioning the boy, was a simple, bigger. Shitty hair laughed so hard he couldn't breathe while Katsuki glowered, kicking at his friend. Aizawa had their roles reversing in a matter of seconds. Good luck, Kirishima. There goes your personal space. Pinky had found the whole ordeal entirely amusing. In fact, most of the group had watched Izuku for the rest of the tour. Not in wariness or nerves, but curiosity and a little fondness. It's not every day you see a deadly assassin climbing on top of a large body because they're afraid of a talking rat. It also's not every day you see a deadly assassin covered in scars struggling to sit and eat stir-fry and rice with Hello Kitty chopsticks. That was another part of Izuku that had the girls squealing. Even encountering Invisalign was all over while they ate. Pinky was possibly delighted with the news Shitty Hair brought of Izuku also having Hello Kitty toothbrush. Izuku didn't notice a thing, not fully concentrating on his food. Katsuki was so fucking glad there wasn't any last damage to his not eating. On one less thing to stress about. Dinner, other than, was a little nerve-wracking. They didn't notice too much at first, too absorbed in how hungry they were after spending the day around walking campus. What Katsuki noticed first was how fucking quiet the common area was. People either chose to eat in their rooms, or they were waiting for Izuku to leave and didn't show up at all. It pissed Katsuki off, especially with the looks they were getting. It wasn't like he could really blame them, though. He just wished it didn't have to be so hard as it went. Eyebags and Sparky turned up for maybe 5 seconds before they turned tail and left again. That pissed Katsuki off. They had Katsuki wanting to charge after them and slap them until they saw sense. But he knew it was dramatic, and he didn't care. None of it was fair. A yawn from Izuku had him distracted, as he forced the younger boy up, pulling him to his room, Aizawa in tow. After he had mother henned the fuck out of Izuku, the fucking hobo snickered at him as he went. He roughly shoved a notebook into the boy's hand. "Bring to class tomorrow," was all he said. Carefully, he held his hand out, reaching for the boy's head. He seemed uncomfortable, but didn't flinch away, so Katsuki ruffled his hair slightly, grunting out a small goodnight. He seriously needed to cut Izuku's hair. With that, Aizawa had left the boy standing in the middle of the room, notepad gripped to his chest. Katsuki stared at the door, listening as the locks clicked in place. For some reason, he had a horrible, uneasy feeling in his stomach. Izuku was alone. The door closed between him and Kacchan. Kacchan left him alone. It wasn't dark, not completely. He still had Eri's light. Eri. He liked Eri. She was like Kacchan, with the good red eyes. He liked Hizashi and Eraserhead too. He liked Kirishima. He still liked Kacchan best. But now he was alone. He didn't like that. Kacchan had left. Eraserhead had left. He heard a mechanical whirth beneath hinges. He stumbled forward, trying the door handle. But it was locked. He was trapped. They left him and trapped him inside. Izuku didn't want to be alone. "Kacchan?" he called out, pulling at the door. He needed to stop. He knew this was going to happen. It was his rules. He heard Eraserhead talking about it. He heard it mention something about a commission and his broom being approved. He knew Kacchan would never leave him alone. Not really. Then, all the lights went out. Izuku whined in the dark, pounding at the door. He pulled at the handles, fingernails scratching roughly at its surface. He couldn't hear anything. He didn't know where he was. When his knees hit the ground, he clawed at Eri's light. Eri. Good Eri. She gave him a light. Where was the light? He whimpered when it wouldn't turn on. It wasn't working. Why wasn't it working? What wasn't working? Izuku didn't like the dark. He squeezed himself in the corner of the room, rocking. He didn't like the dark room. Why was he in the dark room? His nails dug into his scalp, scratching up and down his arms. Did he do something wrong? Did he upset Papa? He doesn't remember. No! He wasn't with Papa anymore. It was okay. He was safe. He was trapped. Alone. It was dark. Izuku really didn't like the dark. His chest hurt. He couldn't breathe. He could smell metal. Taste it. He wanted out. He didn't want to be there anymore. He didn't want to be alone. He didn't want it to be dark. Light. It was sudden and harsh. Then red in his vision. Izuku lashed out. He didn't want to see red. He was good. He's been good. He's... Caramel. The red was gone. He felt the ground leave him, surrounded by sweet and heat. He whirled, pulling closer to the warmth. He was being moved. It was brighter. He didn't know where he was going. But it was okay. He was safe. It was warm. It smelled sweet. Kachan's safe. Okay. Oh my god, I saw BKDK on the notes. Hold up. Also, little side note. I love BKDK. This isn't planned to be a romantic fic, but there's a number of hints to it. In my mind, it still won't be a romantic fic, because that is not Izuku's main focus right now. Thank you! Sometimes, though, I accidentally write in the lovey-dovey shit. Izuku finds comfort in touch as long as he's in charge. Touching Kachan proves he's there. Obviously, other teens are gonna see this and be like, wink wink. But yeah, just wanted to say there is no plans, as of yet, of making this romantic. Izuku has his comforts, and Katsuki is one of them. Touching Izuku and knowing he is real is something important to Katsuki too. Oh, okay, yeah. Maybe in the future, like, they get together is what I was thinking. I had to make sure I was still muted in the voice call that I'm with my significant other. Ugh. But I hate that it was commission approved, so the commission said that Izuku needs to be locked in and turn off the lights. I hope they really fix that, because not only did they turn off the lights, they turned off all lights. That is fucking horrible. That is horrible. I actually started to cry. I actually had to stop recording and I had to come and watch my significant other and their friend play a horror romance game. Don't ask. Because I was distraught. I was really distraught. I am not as distraught, clearly. I could think clearly. It's not gonna be like last time when I went on a whole rant about eating. Don't worry, I'm fine. Who knows about the next episode though, so haha. Anyways, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.